Mimics gain information on people by watching their daily lives and pick to hunt people when they are most vulnerable.
Hello guys, it's me, Running Gorilla. Welcome to my game on Android, Running Gorilla.
Hello and welcome back to Wish for Death Island. Population me and... Today we're diving into another one of those series that catches my eye, and I kind of drop my usual style of content attitude to try and explain why I like it and what's happening. This one is very... fleshy, and if that bothers you, I suggest coming back when you're not eating. Today we're also doing some kind of art in the background as per usual with these kind of things. The creator is a very talented artist, so I am trying my hand to learn from him by doing my own rendition of one of the components of the series. So I hope that background footage is enjoyable to you. You can see the full one on my shop channel if you would like, with some spoopy kind of Silent Hill music as per usual. Vita Canis is a series by Darian Quiloy, and is one of the most in-depth and charming series I've ever seen in terms of horror content on the internet for a while. Season 1 is currently finished, and while I'm trying to put together something for Monument Meth, I figured I would talk about this.
Life has thrived for millions of years. Creatures big and small have found ways to adapt and evolve to flourish in all types of environments. From barren wastes to
There is a
lush
documentary produced by something called the National Living Meat Research Company, and it was originally a bunch of different clips, but it was formed into a documentary, which is the kind of recommended way to watch all of the clips because there is some additional content added. Thus, that's where we start. In the year 1930, 60 years from the point of where the series is happening, beings seem to appear on Earth. However, I think appeared is not really the correct way of saying it because they weren't from outer space. Scientists determined that they were actually from Earth, so I guess it's more like they were making themselves known rather than appearing. They were then called the Vita Canis as like a scientific name for what they were, even though what we know about them is not that much. They were split into categories, branching off of one kind of big version. There are 7, well, not. According to the clips individually, there are 7, but when you watch the documentary, it seems like there's one more. The one thing that pretty much all of them lack is skin. So they're a bunch of like red blobs covered in hot Cheeto dust, and they're all connected and feeding off of each other, like Reddit mods, I guess. Let's start with the first one, which I consider to be like the root of them all, the one that helps the other ones grow. It's called the crawl. It's like a tree root or a vine, but it's made out of sausage, I guess, and doesn't really do anything. It just kind of vibes like a plant. It actually is incredibly beneficial to the normal plants on Earth because it provides incredibly nutrient soil where it lives. It also has its own version of photosynthesis, and it functions in harmony with other plants. When it dies, the nutrient soil kind of becomes a compost for other plants, and it basically boosts the environment's life cycle. But to the point where it becomes a bit extreme, like plants just grow everywhere, and the more that they grow, the more that the Vita Canis crawl grows. So it'll take over things like radio stations, which is in particular pointed out in this newspaper. Each one of these entries in the series has a newspaper that is very quickly shown on screen, but it seems to have a title that is at least visible, even if the text isn't, about the Vita Canis and why it seems to be a bit strange, even if it's more benevolent in some circumstances. Right now, the crawl is being farmed, which isn't super easy to do because it doesn't exactly work in favor of being controlled by a human, but it seems to be okay. It's not yet available for human consumption. The yet bothers me a bit. Now, if you think that this sounds abnormal, yes, of course, it's a fictional series, but I do want to point out, as someone who's kind of like a amateur hobbyist herbalist and gardener, plants all don't work in harmony. A lot of people like to think that you can just plonk a bunch of plants down and they're gonna grow no matter what, and in some circumstances sure, but when you keep a garden, you have to make sure that plants don't feed off of each other or try to take over and cut each other's soil supply off. There are a number of plants that don't like each other, and things will be very hard if you try and grow them all together without taking that into account. There are also even instances of albino plants who will become like a parasite and suck things from the other plants. In some instances, this can actually work in their favor because of the toxins being removed and like a symbiosis kind of thing, but a lot of plants are really vicious towards other plants. Like, you don't see it a lot, and it's a lot of like kumbaya, the earth is like all friendly all the time kind of attitude, but if you think about it, it's pretty vicious. Not to mention, the whole idea of fungi is just very strange. Scientists don't know as much as you think that they do about them, and they can actually easily soak up toxins in the soil to make like super poison. But the crawl kind of draws off of that and makes it more extreme in a way that I think is really cool. Anyway, next up are the trimmings. I kind of hate them, but I also love them. They're like little bean lumps. They grow from the crawls like fruit and then branch off to grow little heads and tiny legs, like a weird little pill bug tomato. They're like raccoons, but also sausages. Unfortunately, they only live 2 years in the wild, unlike raccoons, because they're pretty slow, but somehow they're bred so fast from the crawl that dying quickly doesn't really make them endangered in any way. 400 of them once gathered under a crawl-consumed satellite dish for some reason, like it was a business conference, but people don't really know why, and it doesn't seem like it was a malicious thing because trimmings are very docile and they're quite kind to humans in the sense that they kind of just act like puppies. People don't really like taking them as pets right now, but you'll see that that will change. A few people do, but more will at some point. The next is the meat snake. It's basically like a long tongue, but shaped like a worm, and it just eats waste, organic waste to be specific. Anything that is like fleshy and dying, anything that is compostable, I guess, but also meaty, that's what it eats. It can only eat stuff that is dead because that stuff is the material that its stomach can break down. The stomach is, I guess, specifically engineered to eat dead shit. They grow in size as they feed once they branch off from the crawl, which is something that they're also born from. They go from the size of an actual worm to becoming more like an actual snake and then bigger. They're actually used by humans in this society, especially with cleaning up after unsightly tragedies because they seem to just eat all of the gore and the corpses. If a plague happens, the corpses can disappear. If a war happens, the corpses can disappear. There are giant snakes as well, but the biggest one on record so far, was over 120 feet in length, living underground in the sewers. After World War II, people were investigating the sewers to clean them up, and it seems that there was evidence that a cult had fed the snake from war casualties, force-feeding the worm corpses until it actually was the size of the sewer tunnel. It couldn't even move. Why is there a cult around the snake? Because it looks like bacon? I don't know. You can't really kill it unless you peel the hard shell back, or burn it, or starve it. It also reproduces via mitosis. They're generally docile and used as trash cans. Mimics are when things start to change. They're like skinless humans, but they're not. They're made of the Vita Canis material, but they basically become weird humans the more human flesh that they consume. That sounds kind of weird. Why do they consume human flesh? Because that's the only thing that they eat, and thus they actively hunt humans. As they are formed, they start off as kind of spindly skeleton, meat-colored skeletons I guess, and they start feeding off of bits of roadkill. Then they gradually turn into something that is not quite a human. Their jaws are contorted, way too wide, eyes are too big. They shamble around trying to attack and consume humans with their spindly limbs, and they're very fast. Despite the horrid appearance, they're actually very effective. They look really ugly once being born, and they stay ugly, but the scariness is something that increases while they're also ugly. The only time that they eat meat is not human is when they first start growing, because they're too weak to really go out and hunt humans. They feed to get enough meat to actually become a proper killing machine. The more mature the mimic is, the more human it looks, to the point where it starts crawling on all fours like a baby, and then it starts walking like a human, and then it starts growing skin. Mimics are hostile, very much so, because they directly stalk, kill, and eat humans. They can spend months trying to pick out humans to follow and then strike exactly when the human is vulnerable and alone. They're incredibly intelligent as well. They live in very populated areas because they're looking to pick off lone humans, stalk the humans for days if not weeks, and then find them when they're alone, either in their homes or somewhere else in the wilderness, and eat them. It uses its teeth to cut and kill the human and then digest all of the material. It can also disguise itself inside the furniture that the human has in its house and wait there for it. Once it becomes more like a human and starts growing skin, it can also wear clothes to further disguise itself. It also has an incredibly talented voice where it can mimic basically anything. There's also a video in the documentary of a mimic trying to get into someone's house and trying different tactics to get themselves inside where the human is hiding. It follows the human in the closet and kind of stalks around outside for a bit. We can hear lots of thumping and aggressive noises. Long fingers come out from the door before the face is seen, and that's about it. As you can see from a few stills of the clip, the eyes and teeth are white and just human enough on such an inhuman frame to be incredibly unsettling. The mimic is the only one out of every one of the Vidacanas to actually get close to looking like a human, as even though they are naturally skinless, they can develop a skin disguise for the purpose of killing more humans. However, there are such a thing as elder mimics who are overeaters. Once they eat too many humans, kind of like, I guess, a gluttony thing, it develops this film on its face and becomes incredibly dark so that you can't really see it at nighttime. They're way more violent, as if they've kind of lost control of their urges, and they have this sort of thick, dark film on them, quite similar to the thing that we saw when the giant worm was being overfed corpses. Harvest must not make a reference. Must not grows from the crawl and then clings onto the crawl like a subplant of sorts. It needs to grow in order to become its own thing, so for a long time it just stays in the crawl. It kind of looks like a pimple egg that has tentacles, and it grows from the dirt, while the tentacles kind of come up and catch its prey. It kind of reminds me of a Gimpy Gimpy in the sense that it has such a horribly effective toxin that anything that just touches it gets paralyzed, and then the tentacles come out and drain the prey of blood. Once the blood has been drained, it pulls the rest of the body underground. It doesn't seem to like smaller animals, it only goes after the bigger animals and humans as well. I don't really know why, neither do the scientists. They think that maybe the smaller animals just aren't noticed, but the plant is incredibly perceptive, so that might not be the reason. With something like the mimic, police try to bullshit a way to encounter, to survive an encounter, for some reason making as much noise as possible and then just waving your arms around or something, which seems a bit stupid. It also says that you shouldn't use a gun against a mimic, which, I mean, why? But for harvesters, it's essentially that there's just no way to survive one. You're just kind of done at that point. The police don't even know how to handle it. And according to the newspaper, when a family got attacked, there was nothing that they could do, so they didn't even want to go there. The host of influence is kind of like the mimic, but it's fixed in a position like a tree, and it can't really disguise itself to look like a human. It has thick skin like armor to keep it protected. to make up for it being only in one place. If it really needs to move, it will uproot itself and then root itself back down in a place where it needs to be. So it's like a tree that can move. Because it's stationary and hard-skinned, it has to lure prey to it using different tactics instead of seeking out and stalking something. It basically has these types of hairs that point upward and release spores around it that influence humans. The humans want to come to the host, and then it kills the human. It's even dangerous to be near one for research. Some of the symptoms of the spores are numbness, forgetfulness, clumsiness, and as these all get worse as the influence of the host increases, stroke symptoms will happen like migraines, motor skills, slurred speech, everything kind of decreasing. The final stage of the infection, that happens after about 7 hours, is the human doing anything it possibly can to go to the host so that it can be consumed. The human will kind of kneel like it's praising like a god or something and then be consumed. The host is really picky though, so it only eats the bits that it likes, like some organs and whatnot, and then just leaves the rest there. It doesn't even clean up or try and take the corpse away, it just sort of dumps it there and expects something else to clean it. However, despite how absolute the infection seems to be when it takes hold of a human, if you can make sure that the human cannot get to where the host is for about 36 hours, the infection wears off and they're fine. The host is only in North America and very rare, which is a sharp contrast to the rest of the Vita Canis that just seems to be completely around the earth no matter where you go. In this one, there's not really a paper, it's just kind of an 8-ball, I guess. The next one is the 7 monolith. They look a bit like humanoids with triangle heads and long legs. Instead of arms, they seem to have a bunch of tendrils that just come out and go all the way down to the ground. They're all in proximity to each other and stand together in a circular shape, completely stationary like giant statues of sorts. They're over 300 feet tall, and the roots from their legs extend down into the earth for unknown miles. It attacks anything close by with its arm tendrils, and its head emits a loud sound that can fry electronics and disturb everyone nearby. However, despite the fact that all of these appeared in the 1930s, these only appeared 40 years afterwards, even though they're so tall that they look like the oldest ones. They really do look like what you think of as like an ancient alien being, but why are they the youngest in terms of having appeared in front of humans on Earth? No one knows why they're there or why they're standing around in a circle. However, the combination of the circle and triangle imagery looks a bit like the 8-ball from before, which was also connected to the cult that was in the sewer with the giant meat snake. That is a weird sentence. The only thing that we really know is that there was a military encounter with the monoliths and it seemed to twitch a bit for some reason, but the monoliths regenerated and the humans retreated, so they're just left there in a location that the government does not want other humans to know about, nor why they're standing there or what they could be centering. There is something going on there that the rest of the population cannot know for some reason.
The singularity is an orb comprised of a dark-colored mineral with hints of luminous colors within its core. The singularity is estimated to be 1 meter in diameter. The orb has several unique qualities that are not well understood. The singularity typically can be found suspended in air by an unseen force. There are also a variety of reading that have been documented coming from the orb itself. Various things like magnetic fields, energy signatures, and other pattern-like signals released by the singularity. The population of these creatures is unknown.
Not included in the singular videos, the compilation video has something at the very end alluding to an 8th variant. It's sort of in a secret clip right at the end, and there's not much in it as if it was kind of bootlegged onto the original compilation by someone else. The singularity is a small orb that has some dim lights inside of it. It can transmit signals and mess up transmissions and TV. The only thing that we know is from this classified document, but we don't know who or why, and it does seem to resemble the circular image. The rest of the series basically comprises of stuff that was caught on TV and videos that certain members of the population are filming, as well as like getting around government censorship and whatnot. So from what you're going to see, the TV will have some very strange information, and the information will be either contradicted or put into a different light by videos that you will see posted by members of the population to their version of the internet. One such thing is a recipe for the crawl, which apparently is edible now. We see this news clip that this person named Vincent is wanted by the police because he's just traveling normally between American states, which apparently is not allowed in this world for whatever reason. Either they're in lockdown or not traveling between states is a normal thing that needs to be done because of the Vita Canis. It's never really confirmed. People didn't want to consume the crawl from the time of the documentary, but now they're making pasta dishes out of it and trying to eat it as if it's normal. The one key ingredient apparently is something called the flavor enhancer, which only needs to be added if the dish is below the temperature of 60 degrees Celsius, which doesn't really make sense because it just looks like salt to me. Unless it's not. In the next video, we see trimmings are now more popular pets. People have decided that the trimmings are actually kind of cute and want to keep them. They eat waste, scraps, sleep in comfy boxes, like taking head pats from humans, little scratches, scream ceaselessly in unending agony at night. They like to be sociable and play in the backyard. They also live to almost a decade, which is very interesting because in the wild they apparently only lived until 2 years. That's a pretty drastic difference. And usually it's the other way around. When you take something from the wild and try to grow it in a place where it's not supposed to be, it usually gets quite sick and has a shortened lifespan, but for the trimmings it seems like the total opposite. They also really like radios, radio signals, and human voices, which makes me think that that's kind of a pattern around the Vita Canis. The next video is about the meat snake that was force-fed bodies from the cult, the one in the sewer.
During routine sweep of an underground train tunnel, the cleanup crew made a grotesque discovery. Found completely filling the tunnel was a meaty wall, and in the center of the mass was an opening with several skulls surrounding it. Closer inspection of the blockage revealed that the mass was actually an extremely engorged meat snake. Its impeccable size had blocked off the entirety of the tunnel's path.
It was discovered in the tunnels by the cleanup crew, so big that it filled the tunnel and it couldn't even move. It had a hardened shell that was so thick that it was just stuck in that one location, being force-fed. For some reason, despite the fact that you would think that it would smell like carnage, it smelled like eggs. It also had several skulls that were used as teeth in like a circular pattern. On the tail end of the snake were masses of uneaten corpses. Even the snake couldn't consume that sheer number. The snake then somehow completely vanished from the tunnel one day without any explanation, despite the fact that it was so huge that you'd think it wouldn't be able to move at all. Another thing to note is, like I said before, the hardened shell seems to be similar to when an elder mimic is created, when it overconsumes the corpses. The next video says that mimics are completely taking over. It's an emergency at this point. We can't keep up with the way that the mimics are able to stalk humans and kill them, because the mimics are basically unkillable. They easily overpower us, they're smarter than us, they have adapted to outpace us in every physical way, and their disguises are basically impeccable. The government is trying to deal with it but doesn't know how, and people are being treated to PSAs on the TV like non-stop. This particular PSA goes over how to understand that you're talking to a mimic. Despite the fact that the documentary earlier said that it was basically indistinguishable, this one says that the ugly face with weird proportions and long fingers are a big giveaway. If you meet one, make yourself big and make eye contact. Scream loudly, aim for the head and legs if you have a gun. Despite the fact that the documentary before said not to bother using a gun. You should also stay in the same area and avoid fleeing to a different area because the authorities need to know where it is to try and deal with it. If they want to deal with it, I guess, which doesn't seem very likely. Either way, it seems like these kind of obligatory run and duck for cover type of things that It's advice for the sake of giving advice, but we all know that if you encounter one, you're dead. It's like when they tell people if you see a nuke coming right at you, just duck. It'll miss you, it's fine. The changes from the documentary basically contradict everything here. The emergency broadcast is either fake information or the documentary is either fake information. Then, in the next part, we see two people named Chris and Janice Grady who want to show the public what they think is a bit suspicious about the death of their neighbor due to a recent mimic attack. Their camera is also weirdly glitchy and it keeps cutting off and jittering, and something very strange is going on as they go further towards the neighbor, that is. Chris says that the inside of the home was, according to the cops, very grisly. He has a lot of questions about that though. The mimic is still in the area, which makes me wonder why the fuck they're doing this alone at night, but whatever. It's also not surprising that Chris gets eaten by the mimic after like 5 seconds. Janice then runs away, but the thing breaks into her house and eats her too. Go figure. In the next video, however, things don't get any better. This is a instructional tape or PSA or news broadcast or something about harvesters. Their growth in the population between 2 months of 1989 is a massive anomaly. There's an island in the middle of the Hudson Bay, which apparently is not real in real life. I had to watch somebody else talking about it to understand that because I don't know things about America. The harvesters suddenly picked up and began migrating towards the island. In any case, we get some truly disturbing and distorted audio of the family mentioned beforehand in the newspaper clipping. The child seemed to have wandered off towards the harvester's location without realizing and started screaming as it ate him. The distraught mother comes in and is killed as she also tries to do anything to help the child, but by the time that she gets there, it's too late. Between them screaming, pictures of the family, and general information about the harvesters, we get pictures of the harvesters moving towards the island until they're basically completely surrounding it. In between all of this, we get these stills of a very strange storybook. We can piece together the storybook to try and make some sort of fairy tale that serves as an allegory to what's happening. I'll explain it now, and then we'll go into some of the last videos in the season. The story basically says that there was a kingdom, and the royals of the kingdom wanted to travel so that they can learn many things. When they were traveling in their boat one day, a great storm struck and the royal family was lost at sea. The prince was then broken off and swept onto an island because he was injured, while the rest of the family managed to get back home. The king, stranded, put himself into a healing sleep that seemed to last forever, because it needed to keep him safe and slowly heal him. However, as time passed, the island around him changed to the point where he couldn't even recognize it when he woke up. He hadn't woken up yet, though. The island critters were all struggling and starving, as they lived in a beautiful forest, but there was no food. One day, however, they found the prince in his trance in the cave, and became very interested in who he was. They had this conversation about if he was dangerous or not, or if they should help wake him up, if he needed food, if he could help them find food. But in the end, the vast majority of the critters decided that it was best not to deal with something like this, because it could be very dangerous. They left him alone and went back to their lives. However, some of the critters in secret went back to the prince, brought him food, and started to take care of him. He woke up one day, recovered, and decided that he would befriend them. They were a bit scared at first, but as he thanked them, they formed a friendship. They then led him out of the cave and explained that their forest was beautiful, but they don't have any food. The prince then did a magic display, showing his colors, and vowed to make a change to help the critters. The critters then awaited his return as he set off for his kingdom to bring news and come back for them. There is a kind of common theory that the prince came from outer space, and is probably that weird singularity orb at the end of the video. What is he coming back for, and who are the critters? Are they humans? Does this mean when the Carnus was discovered in the 1930s, that was when the allegory started? I don't know. We'll come back to it in a minute. The next video is again about the flavor enhancer. This video basically starts with a normal ad saying that in 1990, the globe was introduced to this flavor and it became so popular that all over the world, people eat it in every single meal. However, the video degrades more over time as the meals become more primitive and more of the flavoring is then dumped onto the plate. It seems like this flavoring is addictive and has some strange qualities that make humans kind of fall into a trance. It seems that being below a certain temperature allows it to activate, which makes me think of how the trimmings need to be kept in a certain temperature to make them happy. Could the flavor enhancer be some kind of offshoot of the carnis? The video, or the ad I should say, encourages the use of it in every single meal. It's like super MSG. It's apparently required for all meals. And the logo, yeah, I know. There is also an unlisted video in the playlist of the series that follows from the ad. It's called Uncovered Documents, and it essentially is sort of a still image of a document. It shows how the company that makes the spice has now fallen out of favor with many concerned groups because it seems that the spice makes people very sick. It is consumed a lot, so the sickness is kind of embedded into its victims over time. There's also some strange things going on in the world. The government and high powers have been compromised by the cult's infiltration. There's also some footage of ants infected by cordyceps, which, if you don't know, is like a parasite that makes the ant travel upward, and then a spike comes out of its head that disperses the spores. The comparison between this and apparently what the spice is doing is a bit concerning. There is something called the Containment and Research Council Association Society, called Carcass. It is unfavored by the government for breaking its policies, and since the government is corrupted by whoever is making the spices, it seems that Carcass is trying to stop them to save humanity, as far as we know anyway. Afterwards, we get a video named Message, which is the final episode of the season. It follows on from the documents. It seems to be some sort of message delivery to Carcass. It contains information about the monoliths that the person making the video has that they think would be very useful to Carcass, and they want to join Carcass's efforts. There's a lot of newspapers and red string connections from whoever the person making the video is. They have some very, very valuable information. It seems that the original documentary was made by a group of students who didn't really know what they were getting into. They assembled as much information as they could about the Vita Carnis and somehow included classified information unknowingly. Now, with the censored version of the documentary that we got, it seems like the government has caught on and is now hunting the students. Many of them have been taken, but some are still on the run. One possible identity for the person making the video is the Vincent person from before. If he is Vincent or not, whoever he is, he has a lot of information that seems to be classified that Carcass needs to get their hands on so they can combine forces.
Alpha team in position. We are experiencing mechanical interference. Should we resume? Copy. Phase 3 is still a go. Preparing for breach.
Breach in 3, 2, 1. Breach.
It reminds me a bit of Monument Mythos in the sense that something really big is happening as all of these plant creatures, like the special trees, are acting together in some sort of agreement that humans don't understand. Well, I guess some humans don't understand, because some of them do in a way that doesn't seem very beneficial for humanity. And those bad people are in all forms of authority. I don't even know how Carcass is able to operate, considering how many people seem to be compromised by the Vita Carnis, whatever is happening. Whatever the case, here's my kind of summary of the events. It seems that during the 1930s, suddenly there was this weird type of fleshy plant that decided to reveal itself to people, or I guess people started noticing it. It was studied for about a year or so, and then officially called the Vita Carnis as scientists decided to officially begin studying and reporting on it. It seemed that while the war was going on in 1939, people discovered that it was easy to use things like the meat snakes to clean up after certain types of carnage. However, as the war was still ongoing, people were more concentrated on that. But once the war ended in 1945 and cleanup crews were officially going around trying to see what was happening, people then discovered that there was a cult going around that had some kind of connection to the Vita Carnis, and we then get an introduction to the giant meat snake, which also serves as an introduction to what can happen to a Vita Carnis when it is overfed human flesh. Why? We don't know. But it also shows that it can kind of evolve in very strange ways. However, we go all the way to around the 1970s after that, when there's a giant population spike in all of the Vita Canis. 1 year later, the 7 monoliths appear, directly after that giant population spike, and the monoliths have some sort of unknown nature to the point where they are and what they're doing is completely censored by the government. A decade after that, the mimics are attacking even more, and Chris and Janice make their video about their neighbor. 3 years after that, things are so serious that there's an emergency broadcast about what to do with all of the mimics, and basically prevents a contradiction to the things that we know about them. 3 years after that, all of the harvesters get up and decide to move towards the island in Hudson Bay. 1 year after that, Flavor Enhancer gets released, and the following year it seems that the entire globe is obsessed with the stuff. This is also after people start eating all of the Flavor Enhancer, when people start adopting more trimmings, deciding to eat crawl, they're getting sick, and there's also somebody who is on the run after being affiliated with classified information and is trying to get in contact with a group trying to stop the corruption from the Vita Canis in the government. It seems a bit confusing, but the one thing that I know is I definitely don't want to live there. At least anime Richard Nixon and anime James Dean and an anime astronaut in a giant lava snake spaghetti isn't trying to take over the world again. Oh yeah, I still need to talk about that, don't I? Well, I guess we'll have to see where it goes, huh? Drop your theories below, I want to know about them. But that's enough for me.
Ah! Schnipp, schnapp! Ah! Ah! Da! Ja! Ich bin Schnappi, das Krokodil! Ah! Komm aus Ägypten, direkt am Nil! Ja! Und Schnappi ist so verletzlich! Denn wenn ich schnapp, den fresse ich! Zum Schnappen bin ich immer bereit!